Awesome. So, hi, Mike. Thanks for joining me. Um, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Mike is a food scientist at CSU Spur, and we're just going to go ahead and jump in and let him get started with his presentation. Thanks for joining us.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Audrey. Appreciate it. So let me get this off so I don't think you're seeing it. The host is recording. Perfect. My name is Mike Gabel. I am the director of our Food Innovation Center here at CSU Spur, and it's a pleasure to be here today. And so what is a food scientist is kind of the biggest question out there. So first of all, I'll start with telling you what a food scientist is not. And so this is like any good presentation, you start with a meme. And so this is something I think you might have seen over the time. So what my friends think I do, they might think I am a chef, but I am not a chef at all. Even though there's a lot of aspects about, the culinary science and food science. My parents probably think I'm a nutritionist. Again, something very close to food science, but not directly food science. Alton Brown is somebody that you might have recognized as a TV personality that had a show back in the day that was very popular, talking about different aspects of food science. And so I'd like to think, I would be Alton Brown at some point. Society might think, hear a food scientist and think, you're the one that's manipulating food or doing something, making Franken food. That's not really what we're doing either. At the end of the day, food scientists are really responsible for making your food safe, developing new food products, making them more healthy, making them more sustainable. And so I'll kind of go through that. And so I'll talk about a few of the jobs I've had and kind of what that process looks like. So when you talk about food science, there's a lot of different jobs or careers that you can have in that. I have spent most of my time in product development, and so that's just new product development, working on developing new food products. So if you go to the supermarket, any food that you see there was made by a food scientist for the most part. And so for the, somebody in marketing says, we need to have a new type of Lunchables, or we need to have, a new Greek yogurt, or whatever else it is. And so you might work for, PepsiCo developing, a new line of soft drinks, or you might work for Danone making, a new line of yogurts. And so this is where they'll come back and they'll say, we want something that's geared towards kids. So think about even how Go-Gurt was made. We want something for kids that they could eat, that don't need a spoon, can easily go in their lunchbox. And so something like that would have came to somebody's mind. They would have handed it off to the food scientist, and the food scientist would have taken that and developed a new product. The second category you see there is food safety and packaging. So food safety is a big deal. We want to make sure that every food product that's in the supermarket is healthy and safe for you to consume. There's another aspect too, just about quality. So food safety talks about making sure that no one gets sick by eating that food. And so that's making sure that we're heating it well enough, just like you think about anything at your home, in your kitchen. If you, undercook your meat, you have the potential to get sick. Same thing if you have, a pepperoni stick that wasn't, cooked right. And so they're making sure that they're doing a lot of checks and balances there. The second aspect is really quality, making sure that that food product stays good for a long time. That's why you have like best before dates. That's why you have different aspects of knowing how good that quality of the product is. You might have eaten something that's stale, that was maybe past its expiration date. Packaging plays a big role in that. Packaging is really interesting just because you don't really, there's always two components. There's the food product, and then there's the package it comes in. And that package is very important because if you had potato chips, you know how quickly they become stale after you've left them outside of the packaging. And so I think there's different aspects there where it's a very big science, knowing how oxygen is transferred. There's a lot of deep science there, but it's a very interesting aspect. Sensory evaluation is probably one of my favorite things, and I was never a sensory scientist. And so this is something else that if you get a degree in food science, you can specialize in sensory science. That is taste testing. So that essentially says, does something taste good? How do I know if it tastes good? How do I know if I have an ingredient I can't buy anymore? If I substitute with another ingredient, do I still have the same appeal? Does it still taste the same to consumers? And so there's people that specialize just in that. I saw something just recently where it said, we're going to hire a professional ice cream taste tester. And, that was a sensory person to kind of do quality control to know if the ice cream is good, but also to go and take it out and to do taste testing with, individual consumers to say, all right, do you like it? What don't you like about it? What would you change about it? And then really with a lot of statistics, and there's a lot of math and statistics in that too, to say, all right, 90% of the people don't taste a difference and 10% do. Do you make the change with those? And you have to make that evaluation. Nutrition is an aspect. There's nutrition and food safety go hand in hand. A lot of nutritionists, talking about how to eat better foods, sometimes come into food science and vice versa. Some food scientists become nutritionists. In the sustainability, there's always the aspect about, how do we produce more green, more sustainable food supply. I hesitated a little bit about putting salary information in there. I don't want to kind of make that the emphasis, but just kind of put a benchmark. And I'm not sure if, you understand even kind of the differences in salaries, but this is, as a food scientist, it's a good, solid physical science in which I think I'll be a little bit on a soapbox here. I think there's good aspects about, getting into a science-based field. But again, at the end of the day, it's not about the money. It's really about, someone important told me, it's not how much you make, but it's how much you keep. And so that's, a lesson in saving money and investing well and making that work out for you. And so I think different people have different, there's lots of different attributes on how well you are sustaining your life through your career. It's about where you live. If you're living in California, New York, it's a little bit different than, living in the Midwest, and how much you're saving or where you're spending your money too. I wanted to share with you, this is, I think, a fun way of seeing the real application of food science. And so if you go onto YouTube and you Google food scientist Epicurious, Epicurious has put out a couple different videos, which I find are very entertaining, where they have 3 different levels of chefs or cooks. And so they have the amateur cook, someone that just, is reading off a recipe, kind of like you would do at home. A home cook, someone that's a little bit more proficient, that's experimented with some recipes. And then an expert, maybe a chef or someone that does this professionally. And at the end of their videos, what they do is they have a food scientist go through and analyze each of these. Remember, a food scientist is using the same things that you would find in your home kitchen a lot of the times. Sometimes they have specialized ingredients that maybe you won't have. But for the most part, they're looking at each of the different components and articulating what's the science happening there. How is the fat and the proteins interacting? How are the different flavors interacting with each other? So I'm going to play a quick clip here. This clip is all talking about each of the different levels of chefs made a sandwich cookie. And so they're going to be talking through, how they use the fat, how they incorporated some air into it, how they made it different textures. All these are based off the different components. And so we'll go a little bit more into that after I show you this clip.
So good.
Sandwich cookies are a delectable treat with endless options for combining flavors and textures. Let's see how each of our chefs made theirs. Bianca made a chocolate sandwich cookie that looks a lot like an Oreo. She used the creaming method for her cookie base, which means she mixed her butter and granulated sugar together to increase volume and porosity to her cookie dough. The sugar crystals bore small holes in the solid but soft butter, essentially aerating the butter. Gabby made a South American-inspired sandwich cookie. Like Bianca, she used the creaming method, but instead of using only all-purpose flour, Gabby used a combination of all-purpose flour plus cornstarch. Cornstarch has no gluten proteins, while all-purpose flour does. In a cookie, we don't want gluten development. By using a combination of these 2 starches, Gabby's ensuring that she has a very tender cookie that crumbles into sweetness once you start to eat it. Bill made a delicious, slightly savory original cookie that has some of the flavors of a soft pretzel, but with a tender, crumbly shortbread texture. Like Bianca and Gabby, Bill also used the creaming method, but added ground pretzels along with his dry ingredients. He wanted to include the slightly puckery tang that comes from pretzels because they're dipped in food-grade lye prior to boiling and baking. The lye raises the pH of the outside of the pretzel, making it more alkaline and expediting Maillard browning, which happens very rapidly under alkaline conditions. That's why pretzels are very dark on the outside and still quite white on the inside.
I don't know why lye is caustic and dangerous until it's baked. Maybe that's a great question for the food scientist.
There are many chemical reactions that happen once heat is applied, but it's basically because the caustic lye reacts with the carbon dioxide and water and proteins present to form non-toxic sodium carbonate, making it safe to eat. It's the sodium carbonate that has the slightly soapy taste associated with pretzels. Bianca made a simple uncooked blend of confectioner sugar and butter with a bit of vanilla extract and a pinch of salt. It's thick and sweet, but it might not be the smoothest filling for her cookie. Confectioner sugar has a smaller particle size than table sugar, but it still won't dissolve completely in the water and the butter, so you might detect some particulate when you eat it.
It's a labor of love.
Gabby made dulce de leche as her filling. She took a can of sweetened condensed milk, which is made from milk that has 15% sugar by volume added, and then reduced it to concentrate the milk to approximately 1/3 its former volume. It's high in sugar and fat. The sugars caramelize and Maillard reaction occurs with the milk proteins and sugars, and she ended up with a caramel sauce that was dark, smooth, and full of complex caramel and dairy flavors.
There's something really satisfying about making your own dulce de leche.
Bill made a chocolate peanut butter ganache, which is why he's our level 3 chef. It's simply sublime.
Ganache is chocolate that's been emulsified with cream, and it's delicious.
Ganache is 1 part chocolate and 1 part heated cream. He whipped in peanut butter, which added a roasted, nutty, slight saltiness to this rich ganache and gave it a spreadable texture.
That's a good cookie.
No matter how you fill them, sandwich cookies are delicious.
I'm going to stop there. So you see different concepts that you might have seen in your science class already. So concepts about, chemical reactions, pH. I think there's just different aspects, but it's very, when I chose food science, and I'll kind of go through my journey right now, it was very applicable. Means I could see it in real time. I could go into my kitchen, I could make something, I could see the food science working in real time. And so I always say, if you have a passion around food and you still like science, I think there's a great marriage there between, those passions. And that's kind of where I started from too. I grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado. I studied, I was very interested in nutrition as a kid. My mom had graduated from CSU in nutrition. And so it was about the time where I was very active. I was a big swimmer and biker and runner. I did triathlons. And so I was very concerned about, eating the right things. And there was different diets out there. So I was studying up about the different diets. And through high school, actually before even going into college, I had the option of going into art. I was a big art person or into the sciences. And I said, well, for me, the sciences seem to be paying my paycheck, to have a little bit more future in there financially. So I went into nutrition. I was actually a double major initially in nutrition and in exercise sports science, kind of those 2 passions I had. Later on, I changed my focus. I went into my counselor and she said, have you ever considered food science? And I never knew about what food science was. Food science for a lot of people is kind of one of these unheard careers, field of study. It's just something most people don't know about. So I said, tell me more about food science. And she said, yes, this is the people that are developing food products, the people that are helping keep our food safe, more nutritious, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, that's so interesting. So at Colorado State, I did my 4-year degree in food science and human nutrition. It's a combined department there. So I got a lot of learning about nutrition, but also food science. So what does that look like when you're taking classes in food science? We had certain laboratories where we were, testing out the different properties of different food components. So we would make like brownies. You would say, all right, we're making brownies. We're going to divide you up into 8 different teams, but this team's going to not add the salt. This one's going to add twice the amount of butter. This one's going to add twice the amount of flour. So you could start to see how those different food components interacted. You could say, all right, without the salt, you miss some of those flavor components. With the twice the amount of flour, it just makes it crumbly. And so you start to see the interactions there. There was different aspects about food processing. So you learn how cheese is made. You learn how yogurt or meat is processed. So there was a lot of different aspects about the different commodities, grains. What are the different aspects of grains? There's different types of starches too. Why does a potato starch interact very different than a wheat starch? What is gluten? You've heard a lot about gluten. So what is that? Why is that important? And so these are all certain things that I've been able to apply over my lifetime and career. After graduating in food science, I decided to go on to grad school. That was just something I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do quite yet. So I went to UC Davis. Colorado State has a smaller program, and so I wanted to go to a bigger program. And so Davis was great. I did a lot of research. My thesis work was on drying of onions. And so it was a neat experience. I did research on both tomatoes and then onions. And because it's a very agricultural school, and so that was neat to see the food processing aspect there. My first job out of college was at Windsor Food, and they're best known for their brand Jose Ole. So I was working new product development on frozen Mexican food, and so that was burritos, taquitos, chimichangas, whatever else it was. And so it was a good starting job for me because it got me in the laboratory. We say laboratory, but it's really a kitchen. It's just a kitchen space. And we had different projects where we'd say, like my first project was, we have a cheese filling on a taquito that when we produce it at the plant, it's a little too watery, or it's not thick enough. And so it's leaving like long streaks along the production. It's just a long conveyor belt. And so they deposit a little bit of cheese sauce onto a tortilla. And so my first project was just thickening up that sauce. So putting specialized gums in there just to make sure that it would still deposit right, be placed on that tortilla right, and then rolled up without causing such a mess. And so it was a very simple, but over the time it was, this convenience store once, there was, I don't know if you've ever seen the taquitos on the roller grill and the hot dog grill. So they'd say, all right, what happens a lot of times is these begin to open up, and so they don't roll anymore. So we have to make this that's perfectly round and rollable. So it was a neat job, and I really enjoyed it for a long time. My next job was with Conagra Foods, and at the time they were the third largest food company in the US, and I worked on their Healthy Choice line. And this was a good experience there too. I probably launched over 20 products for them, different entrees in the Healthy Choice line, working not only in their frozen lines, but also their shelf-stable lines. And it was good for me just because I got to see a lot of different components of that. I got to work alongside of these sensory scientists. And so again, you would make a product and you say, all right, to me, this tastes good. Does this taste good to our consumers? And so the sensory scientists, the taste testers, would put it in front of people and say, all right, what do you think about this? Is it sweet enough, salty enough? What would you change about it? And so there you make revisions, and then it'd be almost ready to go out to market. This one was interesting. This was an interesting product here just because I remember we had a couple sauces that we'd made that were very high in sugar. So Healthy Choice was interesting too, because you had to have a certain targets for fat and sugar and calories. And so that was where, you have to use your understanding of nutrition, but also food science to say, all right, there's all the different components that go into a food. So you say, all right, how does this, if I add more chicken here, people are going to like it more, but that drives up the cost. And so you always have to be aware of like the cost of it. You have to be aware of like how much, sodium you have in it. So you have to say, all right, how am I going to reduce the sodium? I'm a little high in sodium. How do you increase the appeal? So, just the visual appeal to it. And it still has to taste good at the end of the day. People want a product that tastes well, tastes good. I remember one of the problems we had is we had a sauce that was like a honey glazed something. And it got so hot in the microwave that it was burning holes in the tray. And so as people microwaved it, it was making little holes and spilling the sauce out onto the bottom of the microwave. So a lot of these things is just you learn as you go. And so you make the changes and you learn with that. Barilla, the pasta company, was a job I spent about 12 years at. And my first job was launching their ready meals. And so these are prepared meals. They were shelf stable. And so what they looked like was this. They were fully cooked pasta with sauce. And this is what we called our tray and tray. So it was you had that sauce of tray that sauce in the tray that would lift out and you could pour it on the noodles. And that one was very technologically advanced. So number one, if you think about it, if you have pasta that you cook up and you leave in your fridge for, a couple of days, it'll start to mold or start to go bad. Well, this was something that was at room temperature. You made this meal, and then you had to heat treat it. And so you had to heat it up. What the heat treatment does is just like Canned food. So if you think about canned food will stay good for a long, long time. Essentially, the way that works is that you kill off any bacteria that can spoil it. There's a lot of bacteria that'll make you sick, but there's also a lot of bacteria that'll just, make it taste funny. And so essentially what you're doing is you're heating it up enough that everything that's in there is not living anymore, can't really digest the food components. And so it stays good for a long time. So this was a big challenge. There's lots of components there, lots of ways to say, how do we keep the color of the pasta looking good? How do we keep the pasta sauce from overheating? So it was a neat challenge. And then this last fall, I came to join CSU Spur. And so let me tell you a little bit about Spur. So we're located right at I-25 and I-70 in downtown Denver in the National Western Center. And so if you've ever been out to the stock show, we're right across the street or right across the train tracks from there. And CSU Spur has 3 new buildings. And so Colorado State University has their main campus in Fort Collins, and they wanted to have a presence in downtown Denver. It's very different from a normal college. There's not a lot of, we don't have classes going on, college classes. It's more a place for research, but also for community engagement. So a place where all ages of school age children can come and visit. So any classes are welcome to come and learn about, careers in food, in ag, in animal, in veterinary science, in engineering. So all of this are open campus to come and learn about different careers and see about some of the research going on too. So we have 3 different buildings. One's dedicated to water, that's hydro. And so we have Denver Water, which is a utility company, has an office there, but it also has a lot of displays about, water conservation, just because, Colorado is pretty much a desert and feeds, all the mountains, the Rocky Mountains feed the western half of the United States with water. And so we want to really be on top of the new technologies that are leading to water conservation and learning how to process water more effectively. On the right side, you see CSU Spur Vita. Vita has 2 big things, a veterinary clinic. There's actually 2 different clinics there. So you can see behind glass, animals being operated on there, usually domestic animals, dogs and cats. And then we also have a equine pavilion there. So a center that is human-assisted or equine-assisted human therapy. So physical therapy and emotional therapy with horses, which is really cool. And then CSU Spur is where our Food Innovation Center is located. On the top, there's greenhouses, there's a rooftop garden, there's a couple of laboratories that analyze soil and plants. But the coolest part is our Food Innovation Center. Food Innovation Center, one part is our big kitchen. This kitchen can be used for a lot of things, can be used for teaching moments. We can customize classes to teach about aspects of food science. This can also be used by like a food truck at nighttime to come and prepare things for the next day. We've had different events here, but it's just a nice general space where people can come and even do some product development. So we're kind of a food incubator. What that means is that we help companies. I give the example where, say you had your grandmother's recipe and everyone says, oh, your grandmother's recipe is so good, it should be in supermarkets. And so you get this idea and say, all right, yes, that makes sense. So you would come to us and we'd help to say, all right, do you have the right ingredients? Let's help you with your labeling and your packaging. Let's make sure that you're, according to the laws of the US, that you're aligned with that. Let's help you to understand the process. Making something in your kitchen's fine, but we need to make, 10,000 units of it. If you want to make a couple of jars of salsa, that's fine in your kitchen. But if you need to make 10,000 jars of salsa, how would you do it? And we're not set up for that, but we'd help you get to that point and then point you to a factory. We always call them a co-packer, so a contract manufacturer. So they essentially take your recipe and they'll make it for you. So we help with that process. If you look here, remember I was talking about the sensory science and scientist. So we have a sensory scientist here at Spur and they lead taste testing. So you can actually get a paid taste tester to come and try foods here. Big companies really want to know if their product is ready for the market. And so what we'll do here is we'll kind of put this, these little windows there, we'll put the food on a tray and then we'll slide it through. And on the other side, there's a computer. And so you just answer a survey, a questionnaire about that product. How much do you like this product on a scale of 1 to 9? What would you change about this product? Would you buy this product? How's the level of saltiness? Is it good? Is it too much or too little? things like that. Pretty typical questions, but it's good. Again, if you're going to put millions or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to launching a new product, you want to make sure that the consumer is going to like it. We have 3 different laboratories. These are laboratories people can rent out, but also spaces to have classes and to learn about principles of meat science and dairy science or produce science. So this is our meat lab. Everything that you need here for slicing and dicing, kind of breaking up like a small butcher shop there. But imagine if you were making, a jerky or a new type of marinated, meat, you could come here and experiment with that. This is our produce lab. And so this is almost a small scale processing production for fruits and vegetables. So we have, the capability to peel 80 pounds of potatoes in 5 minutes. The thing in the back is like a washing station or wash it all. We have a big industrial salad spinner. So after you've peeled your potatoes and you've used one of our dicers to make it into small cubes, you can wash it and you put it through a salad spinner. Then there's a bag or two. So this is to examine, how people out to say a food bank receives, a donation of 600 pounds of, potatoes or lettuce or whatever else. We can help them process it so it doesn't go bad. And the last part is our dairy lab, and it's not quite completed yet. This will have the ability to make ice cream, to make cheese, to make, milk, yogurt. And so this is just a nice space that we imagine will be used as, someone wants to develop something new, but also could be used for courses, like a summer camp, if you want to learn about, how to make cheese over the course of the summer, or even for a professional cheesemaker that could come and learn how to make different types of cheese. And so all these kind of, incorporate that Food Innovation Center. In the end, kind of wanted to, want to go back to my life as a food scientist and just kind of, my typical day of what that looked like a lot of the times. So most of the time, I would say a third of my time was spent in the kitchen, working on new projects, working on how to, develop a new meal or develop a new burrito or whatever that looks like. Another third of my time was probably spent on the computer working through, a big spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet of saying, all right, how do I balance the cost of the ingredients with, like I was saying, for the healthy choice meal, with the level of protein or fat or whatever else. And so really thinking through those. And then a third of the time was probably spent in meetings working with the marketing people. And so that requires good communication skills, because a lot of these times we're speaking different languages. When you speak with someone that's like an accountant, they're going to speak a different language. And so I go, okay, you have to explain that to me again. When you're speaking to people about food science, you really have to not dumb it down, but use a very non-technical language to explain certain principles. Marketing will want to do this and this. They want to say, can you do this type of flavor? And say, no, that really doesn't work, because after you cook it, you're not going to have that same flavor. Or we want to do this and this and this, and say, well, we're going to try to do this, but we can't do this just because of some technical limitations. So there's just that amount of communication is very important there too. A few other things that I think are important, and this applies not only to college, but also to being in, when you have your first job or throughout your career, is a few things that I found that were important to me is being involved. And that means being involved. A lot of, you as high school students are involved in clubs and activities and sports. I think it's, sometimes you get to college and say, I only have time to study. Or you get to your job and say, I just want to do my job, but I want to do anything else. I found that as I was more involved, I grew a lot more people. I got more exposure to different ways of thinking. It was really neat to be involved with certain activities, even at work. So one of the things that I really enjoyed was taking on different committees. So we had Take Your Kid to Work Day. And so for 6 years, I was involved with that. And at the last couple of years, I was the committee chair. And so it's just neat to see and to grow that program. I think when we first started, there was 20 kids, and by the end, there was 80 kids. And so it was neat to be involved. And what that did for me is, the leadership in my organizations saw that, I could take on this different challenge. They gave more trust to me. I was given more responsibility or recognized for doing that too. So I think always be involved, whatever that means. I think even through schooling, there's always, when I was in college, I was able to be part of the food science club, and that food science club would get together, talk about different things, go out and visit different factories, different places. And that just gave me a broader exposure to how to start networking with other people. Another word of advice is just to have a team mentality. And so what that really means is, you can put a, you can either be a jerk or a nice guy, and I don't know how else to say that, but I've always found that when you're open and you're friendly and you're willing to provide resources or give a little bit of your time, people are very willing to reciprocate. They're willing to give back. And so I've always found that, being a very nice person, generous with your time, generous with your expertise, it pays dividends, we say, it gives back to you in the long run. And so I remember certain people saying, no, we can't share that information, or we have to almost cheat in the way we communicate with other teams. And it never seemed like that ever worked out well. One boss of mine said, no, when we do our cost, our numbers for our recipes, we always have to inflate it like 10% and say, well, that's probably not realistic, and so it never felt right or honest to me. So I think there's a lot to do with integrity and really kind of being open and communicative, and people begin to trust you. And I think there's a great amount of speed that comes with being trustworthy and having people rely upon you. One of the great things that I think is super important for people nowadays is to be able to communicate well. And so probably through high school, you might have had a speech class. And I remember taking a speech class even in college. And I think that was, I enjoy public speaking quite a bit. But I think there's something to be said about having that skill. Because if you go into a field like engineering or if you're anyone but someone in communications, you might not have those skills. I say, find ways to develop that. There's something to be said about effectively communicating. We talk a lot about storytelling, really getting your point across. And a lot of it comes down to having a good way of communicating, learning how to speak well, but also having the ability to, convey a good point in a very concise language. Somebody said conciseness, using the least amount of words equals competency. People can understand you better and they trust in you more if you can, consolidate the amount of words that you need to use. So, and then the last thing I think is, something that the world's, it's hard nowadays because we're surrounded by distractions. And so this is just something that is hard for a lot of us, even people that I surround myself with say, it's hard because there's so many distractions. We have notifications going off on our phone. We have people emailing us at all hours. And so the best way that I can say, even through college, is, turn off your phone, get in a different room, turn off your internet. There's different ways. There's lots of life hacks to do that, to avoid distractions, but, find a way to do that, because I've heard something to the effect of, if you're distracted, it takes you 20 some minutes to get back to the original task. And so if you think about that happening constantly, day by day, every hour you get a new email, you see the notification comes up. So I've turned off most notifications on my phone. I've turned on most notifications on like my email, so I can really concentrate on something. And I know myself, I think there's lots of things out there. I won't kind of go too deep in this point, but there's ways to almost a life hack. So anything that has a high amount of brain processing, I would say I do in the morning time when my brain is fresh. And then when I have to do simple emails or very short tasks, I do it in the afternoon. A lot of people think, I'm just going to get all of my little tasks out of the way first thing in the morning, but then you don't have time to really do kind of those deep thinking work. So lots of ways to really kind of, work around that. So these are just a few of the things that I've come across that have helped me to be successful. And I think, learning from other people too, having people mentor you, having people see what successful people do and ask them about what they do. And I think people are very willing to share with you what has helped them and has helped them to be a good leader. And again, a lot of it comes down to, finding that balance in your life too, with your work in your life and school and everything else. There's a lot more to be said than having that satisfaction in your job. It's satisfaction outside of your job too. And so, And that's about it. So hopefully you learned enough about, what it is to be a food scientist, kind of what a career in food science looks like. I've never regretted it. I talked to a lot of my friends who are food scientists, and they all are very happy. It's one of those careers that has a very high placement rate too outside of college. And there's always food companies looking for food scientists. Again, it's one of those hidden majors in college that not a lot of people think about, but I would highly recommend it. And I am happy to share any other insights as needed too. So I will open it up to if there's any questions at all, and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I know I learned a lot about food science. I didn't know very much about food science before this. And I appreciate your last slide kind of highlighting some of those soft skills. I know those are a lot of the skills that schools have identified as things that they really are trying to work on with their students, like the communication and the collaboration, all of those pieces. So that was really
Wonderful.
cool to see. I was curious what your favorite part of your job is.
Oh, I love seeing my product on shelf. So I have quite a few selfies of myself, with my products, and it's neat to see that, I've probably launched about 50 some products. And so it was fun just, going into Costco and seeing there's my, my product, or going to the supermarket or seeing a commercial. It was really fun when I worked at ConAgra because they'd have the commercials too. And so I'd go, oh, I developed that product, that was my product. And so that's very satisfying. I really like the problem solving aspect. You wouldn't think, you're making a recipe. It's like a lot of people do at home right now. But there's a lot where you're saying, all right, I'm making this on a small scale. When I take it to the plant or the factory and have to make mass quantities of this product, there's a lot of problem solving there. And I really enjoy that. There was one product we were making that was pasta in a pouch. It was kind of like that ready meal, the shelf stable pasta. It's called Ready Pasta. It still exists on the market right now. So Barilla makes this product that's shelf stable. You just open it up and you cook it in the microwave for like 60 seconds. When we first started launching that, or first started producing that in the factory, it was just a mess. There was pasta that was raining from the sky. It was something where you cook the pasta, but if the line went down at a certain point, you think about these long production lines, there's lots of conveyor belts, there's lots of different processes. You have to cook the pasta first, then you have to put a little bit of salt and oil on them, and then you have to put them into a thing that weighs all the different pasta, making sure you get the right amount in each pouch. And so if anything breaks down along the way, you can't stop pasta from cooking. You can't stop that because it'll overcook. And so at certain points, there'd be a lot of pasta coming through the line. And if certain part of the line was stopped, then it start to overflow. And it was up on a second story too. So you'd see like this pasta raining down. And so there's lots of learning curves there, but I enjoy it. I learned enjoy the problem solving aspect. And that's why it's nice here at CSU Spur. So we have a lot of different clients that come in and have basic. They might be somebody that just has a small product they're starting up. And so they just need some guidance or some counseling saying, all right, what is the best packaging I need to use for this? How would you do this? What would I'm having problems with my jam or jelly not sitting upright, so how do I solve that? And so it's neat. I really like that aspect.
Yeah, that's super cool. Kind of a follow-up question. So at the Food Innovation Center, how does someone go about bringing their recipe to the center? Do they apply to be able to use the space? What does that process look like?
We usually sit down with people. They reach out to me or to one of our scientists, and we just sit down, understand what their food product is, understand what their needs are. A lot of times people already have, an existing product and they just need certain aspects. They say, well, we've only been producing a small amount. Now we need a food safety plan. A lot of, the government really wants you to have a very clear plan on what you're going to do to make sure that the food is safe. And so we'll say, we can do that for you. We can help you identify, what are the critical aspects, are you heating to the right amount? How do you verify that you've heated enough? That's just, there's certain things logically thinking about that. So we can help you through that process. So a lot of it is just, sitting down, having that initial conversation, understanding their needs, understanding what they want. A lot of times it might be a big company that just wants to have a taste test. And so we'll go, okay, let's talk through. Because we think about a taste test, you saw the booths that we have there. There's a lot of different types of taste tests too you can do. You can say, all right, well, I want to do like a focus group where I want to have, 8 people sit around a table and discuss it, kind of, interact with the people and ask them different questions. Or I want to just have like kind of a blind taste test where they sit in a booth, they don't know, whose product this is, but they just kind of respond back. Or I want to see how these people interact with the product at home. So we call that like a home use test. And so we'll send you home with, the product, you'll heat it up in your own microwave, you'll try it out and be able to say, all right, did you have to add anything to it? Did you add ketchup to this product, or did you, eat it by itself, or did you, what time of day did you eat it? So they just want to understand how you would use it in your normal lives. And so there's different, this is where we sit down and everything's kind of customized to their needs and to really understand, their basic desire for their product and where they want to go. So, smaller people might need certain things and bigger companies might need certain other aspects.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think those are kind of my only questions. I appreciate your time. And we're definitely going to send this out to our schools so that they can, share it with their students in classrooms when they have time. But thank you. I appreciate your guest speaking today.
You are very welcome, Audrey. Appreciate your time too.